with us on the line right now. He's been covering Nevada politics for decades and decades, one of the great journalists out of the state of Nevada. And, of course, he's the CEO of the Nevada Independent. It is always a pleasure to have Jon Ralston joining us on the show. John, I really do appreciate you coming on. It's good to see you, my friend. How are you?
Good to be back with you, Brian. Thanks for having me.
Of course, always a pleasure having you on, John. And wow, we have a lot to get to in a short period of time here. I don't even know where to start. You know, it's been a little while since we spoke. Let's talk a little bit about Mike McDonald for a moment, if I may. What was your reaction when you heard that the FBI took his cell phone? What do you make of this story?
Well, this has to do undoubtedly with the fact that McDonald, after the election, who with Adam Laxalt led the election denier movement in Nevada, and then McDonald and 5 other people, I believe it was, held a fake elector ceremony in front of the legislative building. And Jim Marchant, who is now running for Secretary of State and is kookier than all of them put together, was there as an alternate false elector. And there have been a lot of reports that that the Justice Department and the January 6th committee are looking into whether these false elector ceremonies where they actually sent what are essentially fraudulent documents to the National Archives, there was a crime committed. And I'm sure they want to know who else was involved. Was the Trump campaign officially involved? Who was McDonald texting, et cetera? We don't know the answers to those questions yet, but it's certainly significant that they seized his phone.
I agree with you. It's very significant, yet it doesn't bother some of these Republicans like Sigal Chattah. You mentioned Nutjob. I believe she's one of them as well. She's running for the AG. She held a fundraiser the other day, John, with Mike McDonald. There was about maybe 20 people that showed up. And as I like to call him, Wayne Allen Kook was there as well. What do you make of some of these candidates running for office that surround themselves around the Wayne Allen roots, the Donald Trumps, the Mike McDonalds? What do you make of that?
Well, here's the thing that's I've had to come to accept as someone who's observed politics for many years and is now at its nadir, Brian, and that is there are people on the far right and on the far left, but especially now it's prevalent on the far right, who are completely impervious to facts, completely impervious to reason. And so they get something in their head or they're told something by Donald Trump, the election was stolen, and they just either believe it or it is convenient or opportunistic for them to believe it. I don't know what Wayne Allen Root really believes about anything. He is the one who, the night of the terrible mass shooting in Las Vegas, said that it was ISIS. He had confirmed it. He has said Barack Obama was a foreign exchange student. Mm-hmm. He lost his column at the Review Journal because he was hawking a fake cure for COVID. He will do almost anything for attention. And Mike McDonald, you know, I've been through this so many times. I've written columns about it and so much else. He is one of the most ethically compromised human beings that I have ever covered. There's so many things to talk about with him. And Sigal Chattah, she's just way out there. Yeah. You know, she got fired by her first set of consultants because they thought she was too far out. So now she's had to latch onto fringe types. And certainly Michael McDonald and Wayne Allen Root are fringe types as well.
John, it seems to go on and on. Michelle Fiore just got an endorsement from Ricky Barlow. You know him. This is the guy who basically admitted to stealing money. Am I wrong? And she's bragging about this endorsement.
Yeah, she's bragging about that endorsement. Ricky Barlow is a felon. He pled guilty and had to resign from the city council. And this is the person that she's touting as her crossover Democratic endorsement. He then, right after he got done with his very, very light sentence, Brian, set up a company that was designed to do one thing and one thing only: get access to his former colleagues. He called it Access. He is still there going to council meetings, lobbying them. He's greeted with open arms from everyone from Mayor Carolyn Goodman on down. Today, actually, Michelle Fiore announced another Democratic endorsement, another former councilman by the name of Frank Hawkins, who, believe it or not, used to play for the Oakland Raiders and went to school at UNR and then became a councilman and got in all kinds of trouble with the Ethics Commission. That's what he and Michael McDonald and Ricky Barlow all have in common. They all have these ethics questions about him. These are the people that Michelle Fiore is touting as her crossover Democratic endorsements. Of course, the scariest thing about all this, Brian, is these candidates, these far out candidates, Marchant, Chadha, and Fury. Right now, they're competitive in the polls because no one follows those races. No one knows who any of these candidates are, and so the same candidates on the other side are going to have to spend a lot of money exposing them for who they are. And as I talked about again, and I'm sure you've observed this as well, there's so many people who are not going to listen to reason that they're going to get 30 or 40% of the vote automatically.
Speaking of people who are not going to listen to reason, let's talk about the Basque Fry. As you know, this event that took place last week, it's an event that was started by Adam Laxalt's dad, right, many years ago. As you know, John, at this Basque Fry event that took place about a week and a half ago or so, they were selling Nazi shirts, a picture of Joe Biden on the shirts at the merchandise table with a Hitler mustache, calling him a dictator. And I don't care whether people do that. Democrats would do that when it comes to Trump. I would call it out the same way. And I think you would agree with me. How disgusting is it that now the Republicans are trying to make money off of this at the Basque Fry event where Ted Cruz was there and all these election deniers were there. And they're selling basically, as I would like to call it, Nazi memorabilia. I mean, that's really what it is, right?
It's terrible. Either side uses any kind of comparison to the Holocaust, the Nazis. There is no analogy that is apt. Both sides have done it, but now it's really prevalent with the Republicans doing this right now. One just slight correction: that was Adam Laxalt's grandfather.
Right. I'm sorry.
Who started? But let's be clear about that. The only reason I bring that up is that when Paul Laxalt did the Basque Fry, he invited people like, wait for it, Harry Reid. It was a celebration of politics and engagement. Now it's just a right-wing loon fest that Adam Laxalt has up there. I mean, we know why Ted Cruz is there. Ted Cruz is running for president. He wants to try to get support in all of the important states. So of course he would come to something like this. But it was a second and third tier list of guests there this time, and it's just the Nazi memorabilia thing. Which, thank goodness, I believe it was Mark Robeson of the
he came on our show. Yep.
Who tweeted that out just so people knew what was going on there.
Yeah, and he came on the show and we talked about it, and he told me exactly what I thought, what took place out there. You know, why would somebody like Joe Lombardo even show up in an event like that? What does he have to gain, John? That's what I was thinking to myself. Why would you even go to an event like that? Why did Lombardo even go and speak?
You know, you have to make compromises in politics, Brian. You have to make what some would call deals with the devil to get where you want to go. Joe Lombardo, I think there's two things going on here. First of all, it's clear that he thinks he has to at times parrot Donald Trump and say things that the base loves. He's really tried to dance around the election denial, as you know. He's never flat out said Biden wasn't elected. In fact, he said the opposite, but he has tried to pander to the other side. So why go to something like this? It's a really good question. I think they're worried that the base is shaky. Why? Because Joey Gilbert, your favorite Republican, has filed this contest of the election that is absolutely loony and kooky. But what Lombardo's team knows is that he got 25% of the vote or something like that, and that those people, Lombardo's going to need almost all of those folks to vote for him. As long as Joey Gilbert continues to say the election was stolen from him, who would have stolen it? Joe Lombardo. I think Lombardo's campaign is trying to play that down. That's a real issue for them. That I think is one explanation of why he would show up to try to show those 1,500 people or however many were there that he's one of them.
That's a good point. Yeah, Joey Gilbert's now trying to tout his book. He wrote a book, and when I said when he got into the race from the beginning, he was never a serious candidate. He's got his law firm out there in Reno. He tried to make a name for himself. Sadly, it worked. I wouldn't be surprised if he ran again down the road. But yeah, just Looney Tunes what he's done with this lawsuit and everything else. I want to ask you this, John, because you've been such a great journalist and a respected journalist for such a long time. What do you make of the story the Las Vegas Sun put out involving Stephen Klobuchar, the billionaire Democratic donor, who is a friend of mine who's been on this show before, releasing text messages between him and Lombardo, where I'm kind of paraphrasing here, where Lombardo said, hey, basically, if I win the governorship, I'm going to take down the Las Vegas Sun. What did you make of that story and that whole situation there?
I've written a little bit about this in my newsletter, Brian. That whole thing is an incredible embarrassment. Steve Klubeck, by the way, someone I've known for a long time, and he's the Indies' biggest donor, and I appreciate him donating. But what happened with that is that Lombardo made what is obviously an offhand comment in a text. Let's talk about putting Brian Greenspun out of business. And Greenspun used that when Klubeck, who they are friends, showed him that to suddenly play the victim and say, we will not be shut up and all this. It's just total theater. And what's so ironic about that is that Brian Greenspun, back when the ever loose-lipped Harry Reid said in person to the publisher of the Review Journal, I hope you go out of business. Right. And the RJ acted outraged by it. Brian defended Harry Reid saying that. So this is all hypocrisy and embarrassing, and just it's kabuki. There's nothing to it. But Brian certainly is going to exploit it because he's supporting Sisolak.
Do you think it affects Lombardo at all? Do you think there's any voters out there that said, boy, I'm kind of on the fence on this one. Should I vote Sisolak? Should I vote Lombardo? And then they actually read an article like that and it could actually affect an outcome of an election? Because I kind of say no. What do you say?
I don't think it affects anybody. I think it's a terrible blight on our business to see something like that happen. Jessica Hill, who I believe probably was forced to put her byline on that story, a few days after that happened, left the Sun. And now she is working for the RJ. So I don't believe those two events are unconnected, although I don't know.
Yeah, well, we'll have to wait and see. But I tend to think that Sisolak is going to win regardless. If you're just joining us, we're speaking with Jon Ralston, CEO, of course, of the Nevada Independent, joining us right now. Jon, let's talk about some national stories. I have to ask you this. I mean, these are unprecedented times that we're living in right now, at least politically. I'm sure you would agree. What was the first thing that went through your mind when you heard that the Mar-a-Lago estate of Donald Trump was basically raided by the FBI? I don't know if raided is the right term, but when this story first came out, what went through your mind?
That this is escalating, that something serious must be going on. I know the reflexive attacking of the FBI by a lot of Republicans. By the way, Adam Laxalt called it the crime of the century. Yeah. I mean, what an embarrassment that is without any knowledge of it. There's a guy who used to be the AG, by the way. And listen, the FBI deserves some criticism like any other institution and has made some high-profile mistakes. But you got to believe that if this went to the upper echelons, Merrick Garland's a very cautious guy. He's known as that. My first impression was, what did they find? What did they think was there that could be that serious? And so all the reporting that's been done, and there's been some fantastic reporting on this by the New York Times and Washington Post, especially, Brian, indicates that there were reams and reams of very sensitive documents there with no reason for Trump to have them. And Trump's explanations, as usual, are unraveling before our eyes.
Isn't it interesting, Jon, that you hear from the right? Well, you hear a lot of crazy stuff from the right these days, but Biden's DOJ, Biden's FBI, and yet they forget that it was Donald Trump that appointed the head of the FBI, who happens to be a Republican, right?
That's right. Ray is a Trump appointee, but it goes further than that. If any president has ever tried to weaponize the Department of Justice and the FBI, it's Donald Trump, with what he wanted them to do, and they generally refused to do, seize voting machines after the 2020 election because there was obvious fraud. So listen, these are all crocodile tears from Donald Trump. I don't know what's there. I don't know if he'll be charged. They're going pretty far for them not to charge somebody. And there's been a lot of people, as you know, Brian, who have been similarly situated, who said, listen, if I had taken those kinds of documents out of the White House, I'd be in prison right now. And so rule of law, disproportionate treatment, all these things are going to come to the fore. But we still don't have enough information, in my opinion.
We don't, you're right. But I still want to ask you this question. What if this was Barack Obama? What would have been the reaction from Fox News, OAN, Newsmax, and every Republican in office? Imagine if this was Barack Obama who did this and his place was raided by the FBI. What would be going on in this country right now?
We would see graphics on Fox News that would have Barack Obama behind bars saying, why isn't he in prison? Things like that. You know, this is the biggest problem, Brian, this selective perception, this validation culture, especially now. It's like they erase history and don't remember how they behaved when Obama was president.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Do you believe the story in the Washington Post? And I know this is we don't know. You're absolutely right. There's a lot of things we don't know, but you know the story that the Washington Post put out based on their source or sources that this could have something to do with our nuclear weapons. Do you believe that? And do you believe that there is a possibility that maybe he had that types of information at Mar-a-Lago, maybe in hopes of trying to make some money and selling some information?
First of all, I know those reporters who reported that, and they're great reporters. So I believe that they had good sources on that. But I also believe what a lot of other people have speculated. This is not fact, that Trump didn't intend to sell them. Now it's possible he did, but I don't. That he's just the kind of guy who decided those documents are his, and he wants to show them off at parties at Mar-a-Lago. Look at these cool documents that I have. That's how childish and immature and inane he is. And he showed that throughout his entire presidency. I don't know why. And before, by the way, he became president, that's the kind of man child that he is. And so I think that's much more likely than anything really nefarious and malicious, although I don't put anything past the guy.
You know, it's interesting. I haven't heard anybody really say that. And come to think of it, I think you're absolutely right. He is childish enough and ignorant enough to let his ego get in the way and just have those documents there because he claimed that he could. I mean, what do you make of these stories that he was flushing stuff down the toilet? We've seen pictures of that he was shredding stuff out there. I mean, do you believe that to be credible as well?
No, I do. The Maggie Haberman is the one who has the flushing of the documents on the toilet in her forthcoming Trump book. I know Maggie Haberman. She's a tremendous, tremendous reporter, maybe the hardest working reporter in this country. And so she not only has pictures, but I'm sure she has a lot more eyewitness testimony we'll see in the book. And I have no doubt that happened because there were reports previously that he did that. And he carelessly dealt with documents in the White House, ripped up documents in the White House, not all classified documents, but that this was a regular practice. And of course, why would he be doing that?
Yeah, no, exactly. I think that's the question we all have to ask. Why? Why were they there? Why was he flushing stuff down the toilet allegedly? I agree with you. So obviously the big story over the course of the last 24 hours, John, is the debt relief package that Joe Biden put forth and made the announcement on yesterday. Democrats and Republicans, it doesn't matter who you are. It seems like everybody has a different opinion on this. I want to know yours, Jon Ralston. What is your opinion on this? Do you think it's good for the country what Biden has done?
You know, I'm not an expert in economics or in student debt, loan ratios, et cetera. I trust certain people who analyze this, and even people friendly to the administration are a little bit concerned about how it's structured. And you saw the political fallout, and that someone like Catherine Cortez Masto, the embattled senator here, immediately distanced herself from it, said she didn't like the way that it was structured, that it's not going to have the impact that it should. I think it's too early to tell them. I don't know enough about the long-term impacts of this to give you a definitive answer.
Understood. Obviously, there's a lot of what some would characterize as accomplishments that Joe Biden has made over the course of the last few months. Jon Stewart was obviously a big part of this bill coming forward, helping our veterans that are having the breathing issues from the toxins they took in. But wasn't it incredible how teeth had to literally be pulled on the right to be able to get this bill done, and yet Democrats refuse to give Joe Biden any credit for it, or Jon Stewart for that matter. What do you make of this bill? Obviously, I'm sure you probably agree with me. This is a good thing for our veterans, a good thing for the country. And what do you make of the times we're living in now where it takes a celebrity like that to really give pushback to people on one side of the aisle to get something like this passed?
Well, you know, it's just sad that it's been coming for a long time, and it's worse it's ever been, Brian. And that is if the other team says black, we are going to say white without even looking at what the details are. The polarization, the belief that that we need to win or make the other side lose at all costs it's really dominated. It's not just happening in Washington; it's infecting Carson City here now in Nevada, but it's, you know, what, there's no perceived benefit to being bipartisan, to being someone who wants to compromise, to being someone who works across the aisle. There's no, and so you need people who say, I don't care how this affects me. And that's why you saw, to some extent, although she's been lionized a little bit too much, why Liz Cheney did what she did. She knew she was going to lose her primary. She knew that. But she also, to give her credit, I think she really believes that Trump and what he has done is a danger to the future of this country. And so, to some extent, you need more people who are going to stand up and say, listen, I'm going to give Joe Biden credit for this if you're a Republican, or you're going to say, I think the Republicans have some good points on the Democratic side. Maybe we should change this bill. But we're nowhere near that. And by the way, Brian, the closer we get to Election Day, the less likely any of that's going to happen.
Sadly, I tend to agree with you. A couple more quick questions for you, John. You've always been someone that is honest, that tells the truth, and isn't afraid to go after either side of the aisle if you feel like it's warranted. It's something that I've always respected about you. So I want to ask you this: in the last 4 or 5 years, has it gotten worse for you as far as criticism from people on either side of the aisle, maybe particularly the right, threats, those of that nature? Even I've had threats over the years. I mean, has it gotten worse for you lately because of, the MAGA world and the world we're living in today?
I have to tell you, I've had a few death threats in my career, not very many. I don't want to exaggerate it, but because of social media and because people can be anonymous on Twitter, and they can say almost anything that comes into their head, and it can be vicious. And I've had all that. And you have had people from the MAGA world with a lot of followers come after me and say really bad things, like Rick Grinnell, the former ambassador to Germany, who's a MAGA moron and a Laxalt echo. He has come after me viciously, but it doesn't really bother me. And I have to tell you, it's just as bad on the left. When I went after some of what Bernie Sanders' supporters did here a few years ago, they are just, I mean, what they have done too. And they like to email too, and they're anonymous and say the most vicious and profane things. But, it's a little bit worrisome, but, I'm not out fighting a war where my life is in danger. I'm just doing what I've always done. And just because of the way information can be disseminated now, obviously the vitriol is easier to put out, and especially anonymously. It's amazing how many do it anonymously, right?
A lot of them do because they're cowards. No
Right.
question about that. So, John, I heard that maybe you were writing a new book. Do I have that right? Can you tell us a little bit about that? I'd love to hear about it.
Yeah, I'm writing a book. I've been working on it for a long time. The definitive biography of Harry Reid, who was a monumental figure in this state and country, and a very complex guy. And I'm still working on it. I'm hoping to have the manuscript done in a couple of months. When it'll be published, I'm not sure.
I can't wait. Can't wait to read it. John, I've always said this about you, my friend. You're one of the best in this business. Certainly, I've always looked up to you and what you do. And certainly a pleasure always having you on this show. I know you're a busy guy, and I really do appreciate your time, my friend. Thank you so much. Can't wait for that book, and hope to talk to you again soon, John. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot, Brian. And by the way, let me just say real quickly before you get rid of me,
Sure.
I didn't know much about you, to be honest with you, before I came on your show. So some of the things you do your homework, which a lot of people don't do, and you're not afraid to say what's on your mind either. And by the way, we need more of that, not just right-wing talking points, left-wing talking points. You do real interviews, and you have a point of view on things, and you're not afraid to state what that is. So you're not hiding that from the audience. So I appreciate more than anything all the nice things you've said about me, but don't underestimate that there's very few people like you doing what you do.
Well, for somebody like you to say that, John, that really means a lot to me. It really does. And I appreciate those kind words. Thank you so much. I guess we just got to keep up the fight and doing what we do and what we love to do, right?
That's all we can do.
That's right. Hey, John, thanks again, man. Appreciate you coming on. Talk soon, and have a great weekend. Thank you.
You too. Thanks.
Appreciate it. That's Jon Ralston. Wow, that's really nice of him to say, because I never have said anything on this show that I don't believe. I don't kiss anybody's ass, right? Jon Ralston is one of the best in this business. Why? Well, besides being a very articulate, smart guy, which clearly he is, he's fair. He goes after the left when it's warranted. He goes after the right when it's warranted. Now, lately, as I say on this show a lot lately, a lot of my criticism is for the right. Name is John. Conspiracy theories, election deniers, you name it. Doesn't mean I'm a Democrat, but people will call me a Democrat or a liberal. And by the way, neither is John, but they'll call us that because they don't like what they're hearing. They don't like the truth. I try to do that. I look up to John because in his career, he's done the same, and I have the utmost respect for him. Always appreciate it when he comes on. By the way, when it comes to